while I still have light and before I stop for dinner, I thought it'd be a good time to do the next chapter in my role-playing history, I guess. I've always had a love for the horror genre. I started reading Stephen King in junior high school. I'm sure I've mentioned that in other videos. We've made allusions to it. My son asked about the Hunter games he's been a part of, and we're not there yet. We're still early 90s. When I was doing Comedy Sports, there was a group of us. Well, somebody once told me, he once came up to me and went, "You're one of them." I went, "What does that mean?" And she went, "You're one of the Fabulous Bakersfield Boys." And I was like, "Yeah, that's true." It was me and Johnny and Derek, and the fourth person could rotate. Sometimes it was Gary or Brett or Pat or Joel. There were other people who fit that slot, but it was usually me, Johnny, and Derek. Glenn. Should mention Glenn. He was part of that group. But what the person that was talking to me meant was you redefined the way we looked at improv. And that was mind-blowing to me. It was a little overwhelming. So I went, "How so?" And she said, "You were just a bunch of guys having fun together on stage with your friends." And I went, "Yeah, that's what we were back then," because the late 80s, early 90s were a time of family, an extended family. And it was a good social outlet for all of us. But there were a group of us that role played together. There were some chapters of Tempest's history in there. But the game we played most often was a game called Chill. And Chill is a horror role-playing game. It's based around the concept of an organization called SAVE, and that's an acronym, SAVE, and I don't remember what it stands for. And you are agents of SAVE who have encountered the supernatural at some point, so you believe. And so SAVE recruited you into the secret society that investigates and deals with supernatural threat. I ran that game, and all of the people I mentioned that were part of the Fabulous, no, not all of them, most of the people I mentioned as part of the Fabulous Bakersfield Boys had a character in that campaign. I remember Pat's character, his name was Omid Beheshti, was based on his roommate at UCLA. Derek's character, Devin Servon. I think the first time I saw The Resistance, which is an improv group in LA that Derek's in, that does improvised action movies, they did a revenge film a la, what's that Charles Bronson movie? Death Wish, where the main character is trying to get revenge for something horrific that has happened to him or his family. And Derek played the lead character in that, except he did it in the Devin Servon voice. And Devin Servon was a knockoff of Jean-Claude Van Damme. He essentially got the acting work that Van Damme turned down. So he was playing this movie star, D-list, F-list movie star, who was going on these supernatural investigations. Paul was in that group. Brett was in that group. Johnny even played in that group once. I remember Ricky Wax with 3 X's, heavy metal star, whatever, however you want to describe it. And that was where I first studied how to create a horror environment, because the Chill game had a lot of supplemental material, including here are the tenets of the horror genre. The two that stick with me the most, because I watch for them in every horror film I watch. I look for how the main characters are isolated, and how you deal with cell phones. I mean, both of those come back to isolation. And I look for how clever that mechanism is. So when a horror movie is an homage to other horror movies that took place before cell phones were a thing, I kind of see that as lazy, because it takes the cell phone problem out of the equation entirely. So I still have all the source books for Chill. Werewolves, vampires, things that go bump in the night, horrors of North America. I should have pulled that book out before I went on my trip, because I could have added to the cryptozoological sites I'm looking at. And that would have been 90 to 92-ish. That segued easily into Vampire the Masquerade, because Vampire the Masquerade came out in the early 90s, and so me already being into horror as a genre and horror-based role-playing games, a game that looked at history through the eyes of a vampire that had lived for millennia sometimes, appealed to me, and the secret societies that were created therein. I don't remember how I met the gaming group. I remember, first of all, the gaming group was Kevin and Dustin and Mickey and Jared and sometimes Kevin's wife Bianca. And I remember that Kevin came to Comedy Sports once when we were at Lamppost Pizza, and he didn't care for it because it wasn't story based enough for him, which is cool. Improv's not. I mean, that didn't offend me. That's another interesting point. I've had people tell me, well, I didn't like your performance and you stormed out. I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't care if you liked my performance or not. Improv's not for everybody, and I get that. And so the Kevin thing at Lamppost would have been 95. And that was somebody that was close to me. And I don't remember. Oh, we had two campaigns with Kevin. Kevin did most of the storytelling in this case, although I did a lot of the storytelling when it came to Vampire, because I read up more on the world. This was going to break into several phases. I'm going to try and do most of the Kevin story right now, but I'm at 8 minutes and I have no idea how much space there is on my phone today. I don't remember our initial forays into Vampire, to be honest with you. I know that Morrigan was not my first vampire. I don't think Morrigan was my first vampire character, because Morrigan's an 8th generation vampire, and the intake in Vampire, they want you to make 13th generation. Those are the newbies to the world. And I don't think we would have attempted the entire world right off the bat. So let's talk about the Morrigan campaign, oh god, I don't remember his character's name. The Asimite campaign, let's just put it that way, and the Warhammer campaign, which is fantasy based. So I'll come back to that one. I created a character named Morrigan, which is the Celtic goddess of war. And so I created Morrigan as a male who had adopted that name because his vampiric sire was female. And his sire was somebody who was in the first vampire source book that White Wolf published. It was a character named Tyler, who was also known as Patricia of Bolingbroke, and according to the White Wolf source material, Patricia of Bolingbroke was sired by Robin of Locksley, Robin Hood. So Morrigan was a Brujah. And if you don't know the game, again, I suppose this is where I lose people and go, I don't know what that terminology means. So without explaining the entire game, there are 13 different bloodlines of vampires, major bloodlines of vampires, plus a bunch of minor ones. And the Brujah are one of the 7 major bloodlines that formed a group called the Camarilla. And the Camarilla believes that vampires have to hide because human beings rose up once before under the guise of the Inquisition and slaughtered vampires wholesale. So to avoid a second Inquisition, at the time in the early 90s, the Camarilla believed you had to hide what you were, and so they developed 6 traditions to keep them safe. The first of which is called the Masquerade, which is essentially you'll never reveal to a human being what you are. You won't allow anybody to see it or to know it. So Morgan is a Brujah. They're the kind of the rabble-rouser bloodline, the rabble-rouser clan of the word clan, of the Camarilla. They're leather jacket wearing activist, protest types that don't like the government in power. And their clan symbol is an anarchy symbol, essentially. So Morgan was one of those. And in the source book on Clan Brujah I read,